Natasha and thank you so much for joining me today. Today we have another video where there is always more than one way, and I want to show you that even when you watch videos, whether it be mine or somebody else's, there is usually another way to do it, not necessarily using the exact products that they have, but you can get the same general idea. Now, I for some reason decided to use watercolors to create a background today. I am not in my usual crafting space where I don't have my supplies with me, so this is the only tiny little paintbrush that I could find, and so probably not perfect, but we make do with what we have, and you can use anything to create your initial background. So you can use inks, you can use alcohol markers, you can use patterned paper, cardstock that you've purchased, plain cardstock, patterned cardstock, go for gold, see what you have. I am just using this little Prima, I think this one is the Confetti watercolor set. This is perfect for me. I have no skill in watercolors, so this just works nicely for me. Now, I have this Tim Holtz stencil here. This is called Lace. Now, when you are looking at this, we want to sort of see where we can cut a track through this stencil. So I am using some mint tape to mask off where I want the product to go and where I don't want the product to go. So you may even have stencils that are sort of, you don't need to mask off. They have this gorgeous sort of rustic edge to them, or that's just the pattern, but I don't really have too many like that, so I'm going to make my own little edge. I wanted sort of an uneven edge, I guess. So as I said, I'm just creating that with what I have, and this is what I have. I love the stencil, and I'm just going to mask off the bits, and I'm not being too fussy at all. I'm just ripping off some of the little bits of the mint tape that's going to cover it perfectly, and then I'm going to go down one side here, and for the first version of this card, we are going to do some heat embossing over top of this. Now, of course, this sort of makes it complicated, but there's always more ways to do this as well. But you can either do this stage pre or post, depending on which materials you're using or which products you're going to use. So for example, you could do a really lovely ink resist technique using this. So if you did the embossing first on your paper, then you put on some ink that is going to resist it, then you would have a beautiful pattern as well. However, we used watercolors and I am going to do this afterwards. So I'm just using a little very cheap and cheerful makeup sponge to put some sticky embossing ink. This is the VersaMark ink. You do want to make sure that your ink pad has enough juice in it. It's juicy enough that you're going to actually get a nice crisp pattern here. If you're working with a really dry pad and then you're trying to dip the makeup sponge into it, your results might be varied, but just make sure you re-ink your embossing pad just like you would normal ink pads. They need the love too. And then I'm just going over and making sure that I think I have all the spots. Now, without completely removing the stencil, it's hard to perfectly see, but one way that you can check, and of course I've used a bit of a hinge there, you could have checked by just moving this around in the light and seeing where you had the VersaMark ink. Now, this is white embossing powder. I use the superfine embossing powder, and I got a really good, clean, crisp, clear image here. So I have, of course, just done this down one side of my paper, and then I'm going to melt this so that it comes nice and crisp white. If you are using something that is water reactive, like if you had used distress oxides to put down the first layer of color, then the white may pick up, the VersaMark may pick up some of the color from behind it. So that's why I used something that was not water reactive for this part of it. Again, if you did it the other way around and you did the embossing first and then put the oxides over it or the normal distress inks, then you wouldn't have a problem. So it just depends on which order you do everything. Now, this is where I'm going to do some fussy cutting. I want to create a gorgeous little edge, and I'm just going to follow the pattern that I have. I am leaving a little colorful border, and these are going to create really, really quick and simple cards. This is also great for bulk card making because it's not too tricky. Now, I have some VersaFine clear ink here. I have a happy birthday stamp. This one is from scrapbook.com. This is just a really gorgeous small stamp, so it has a really good price point, nice and bold, lots of fun techniques that you could do with this one as well. And then I'm just going to stamp this on my card front. My card front measures about 3 3/4 by 5 inches. I'm just sort of seeing where there's a good place to put it because I'm going to have that border kind of going down the side. Now, there is no reason that you couldn't also mask off directly onto your card front and do the inking and all that sort of thing there, but for me, it's just easier to do it separately. Now, to make sure that I get really good contact and adhesion here, I'm going to put a couple of strips down the side here because I'm not exactly sure how my colourful piece is going to sit on my card front. So then with this piece, all I need to do is make sure that I get the edges with some double-sided tape. I just find that double-sided tape adheres quicker than my liquid glue at this point, so that's the only reason I used it. But you can certainly go ahead and use liquid glue. That would give you a moment to move it around as well. And this is where I can adjust this. For me, it's just easier to have it upside down so that I can work right-handed. And then put this sort of as much on as the sentiment will allow me. And that just, you can do that at whatever angle you may wish. I just wanted it to be uneven from top to bottom. So you can see there that I'm going to have some overhang on the back, and that is exactly what I want. I want the ability to adjust it around wherever I want it to go. So grab some long bladed scissors, trim down the side there, and just use your card front as the guide, obviously, so the scissors kind of glide down the side. Then at this point, just because the card is pretty simple at the moment, I'm actually going to ink up a little bit of an extra layer here to go behind a matting layer. I'm using the exact same ink, except for I am going to just dab it on using a little sponge, a makeup sponge. But if you have finger daubers or domed blenders or something like that, or brushes, then by all means pop it on like that. And this is just, as I said, the card is really, really simple. We're going to add a couple of things to step it up, and this is one of them. So adding in a matting layer. I again have gone for double-sided tape here, but pick whatever you are more comfortable with. And then of course my normal card base is just 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. Now I'm going to move on to the second card in a minute, and then I will finish this one off at the end because we're going to do a couple of things that are just going to sort of move it on up a step or two. So that looks good to begin with. I put the layer up on foam tape just to give it some dimension as well. Now moving on to the next technique that you can get a similar result but using different tools. So I am going to change up the stencils just to show you that you can pick any stencil as well. So this is the Brocade stencil. Now, I absolutely could have picked the exact same stencil just to show you that you can do it this way as well, but I think it's nice to sort of have some variation. Even though this is kind of you can always do it more than one way, I just think it's nice to see different stencils. So this is just of course, a general pattern, and this time we are going to use some modeling paste, embossing paste, whatever you have. This is the light and fluffy one from the Crafters Workshop and is most definitely my favorite to work with. It comes in 2 size bottles, a smaller, maybe a 2 ounce and an 8 ounce or so. I tried to get the big one, they've been out of stock. This is a very popular product, and so I got the 2 ounce this time, but that's okay. And actually, I'm going to do this one in kind of 2 parts. So I do that part, and then I didn't like the top design of the stencil bit there. So I take this off, and of course you can see that I am actually just using the other side of the watercolor piece that we created to begin with. So that's what I mean. You can take one piece and make 2 cards out of it, a 2-for-1 sort of deal. So that's why it's good for the bulk card making. And then I lightly dry the embossing paste, and I'm going to pick another part of the stencil and then add that up the top. So just because the stencil comes one way doesn't mean that you can't sort of shift it around and change it up to suit what you think would look best as well. So then I'm going to do this little bit up the top, same thing, and the embossing paste, because this is a pretty thin layer and also a pretty fine detailed stencil, it does not take long to dry at all. And so I have lightly dried it with my heat gun, but I would say that this isn't perfectly dry. I wouldn't put it through the mail just yet, but honestly a couple of hours and this would be grand. So I'm going to do exactly the same thing, just take my scissors, fussy cut, and leave a little colourful border. I love the stark white contrast and the gorgeous, colourful, full rainbow colour behind it. I think that's just a really stunning sort of visual piece to go down the side of any of your cards. Again, we're going to keep fairly similar here just because I want to get not too far away from what we could do if you could do it one way or the other. I did think it would look really nice going this way. So going landscape instead of portrait, but again, I'm going to keep it the same as the other one, but I think that would look really nice too. Now, this one here, I just want to show you what a difference this could make. This is the problem with my card making. I truly could go off in so many different directions. Now, this paper pad here, I don't know if it's still available, but something like it will be. And you can see that you can pick out almost any of the colors and they would match a color from the background. So that is one of the things about using rainbow. Any of these colors here, you could really match up. But this gorgeous yellow looked like I couldn't resist it, and I wanted to show you what you could do. So this is two-sided, double-sided obviously. One has a larger pattern and one has a smaller pattern, and I really like the look of this. I think this just looks a little bit different. I think you can still stamp that big bold sentiment on here and it would still show up perfectly fine. So I thought I would do that just to show you. So I'm going to use some VersaFine Onyx black ink for this one. So a really crisp stamping dark black ink. I've cut it down to be the card size that I need. I can fit my sentiment in there just like the other one, give it some good pressure and a minute to transfer, and then take it off, and you can see I get pretty good stamping results. And then this is what this one would look like. But I want to keep it the same as the other one, and the yellow was pretty bright. So I'm actually going to stamp this again, just on regular white cardstock like before, but this one is not going to go to waste because I am going to use that piece of coloured yellow cardstock as my matting layer. So I didn't want to waste it, but I did want to try it out and just show you that you certainly don't have to work on white at all. Again, lots of double-sided adhesive, and that is going to make sure that I can put this down in any kind of direction that fits around that sentiment. The B kind of snuggles in quite nicely there. And again, I like the idea that it's sort of all uneven up the top. Then you can trim down the sides and everything just comes together nicely. Now, I have done quite a lot of videos now where I kind of have the theory that there is just always more than one way. So I will put a playlist on my channel if you would like to see kind of this and that cards where there's an alternative, but you get similar results. If there's something in particular or a product in particular that you would like me to think of alternatives or see if we can create a different look, then let me know in the comment section down below, and that's always fun. I can't promise anything, but I can always look and see what is out there and what would be interesting to do, because yeah, this hobby can be expensive, and sometimes it's just feels really good when you can use the supplies that you have already purchased and invested in, and we're able to put together great looks. Now, I'm also going to use some little gem drops here, little water drops, and once you put these behind glue, they sort of almost disappear a little bit. I absolutely love these as a finishing touch, but this is two different ways to complete this gorgeous card. Let me know which is your preference. They are slightly different, but pretty much the same. I, of course, will have a list of supplies down below, as well as a link to the Buy Me a Coffee in case you'd like to support my channel.